So this is an old translation, our conversation is in heaven, which I always assumed that meant that we were really talking about religious and spiritual things all the time. But the new translation is our citizenship is in heaven. So it kind of ties in nicely with the theme of the seminar. And what I thought we could do is explore the link, as Herman will in his way, explore the link between meditation and society. Does it make a difference? I think we agree that it makes a difference in our own lives, which is why we meditate, we change through the practice of meditation. And I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that they change for the worse. But usually we're aware of the benefits that come to us at a personal level, interior level, spiritual level, and a psychological level in relationship to other people. But does meditation make a difference to the world? Well, by extension, it must do, I suppose. If we are changing for the better, then we're probably a little nicer to people when they bump into us on the metro, or at the airport, or they get in our way, or we are more ready to say sorry when we make mistakes. So presumably we improve a little bit in our relationships to others. But is there an even deeper and more important way in which we can see how the contemplative experience changes the world? And I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I think maybe in a conversation I had with John Main many years ago, when he spoke about contemplation as the foundation of civilization. And that took me by surprise and made me think about what contemplation meant, and indeed, what about our experience of civilization today? And it was about that time, actually, that Kenneth Clark, the art historian, brought out the first of those great series, TV series. It was on civilization. Still very worth listening to, watching. And he begins in a very Eurocentric way, but he begins with the breakdown of the Roman Empire and the beginning of the Dark Ages. And he says, in one of those early programs, that civilization was hanging by a thread. And at that point, he transports himself to Skellig Michael, which is a piece of rock, actually two pieces of rock, the greater Skellig and the lesser Skellig, about 7 miles off the coast of Kerry, not far from actually where John Main's family were from. And it's 700 feet high, and it's a barren rock, to which sometime in the 5th century, some Irish monks went and cut steps, 700 steps, into the sheer rock face, which they then climbed. And on the top, they leveled off a little bit of the peak of this triangular rock as their monastic settlement. And they built some extraordinary dwellings, the beehive huts, and also some unbelievably dangerous little hermitages hanging off the edge of the cliff. So we don't actually know anything about how they lived there, but it was a very Irish kind of extremism, probably. But so Kenneth Clark went there to illustrate the link between the monastic movement and the thread that was holding civilization together through those dark ages. The philosopher, a recent moral philosopher, Alistair McIntyre, in his book After Virtue, where he describes the sort of the breakdown of the moral system, the unified moral universe that we took for granted, even if you didn't believe in it. Everybody was contained in it, which is, of course, now disintegrated into many different opinions and so on. And at the end of this brilliant analysis of a change in a moral consciousness, in his afterword, he says, many people say we are now entering a new dark ages. And you have to be careful about drawing these parallels between ancient history and today, but there's something to be said for that insight. We're certainly going through dark times. Let's hope that it's a dark night of the soul, which will mean that when we go through a dark night of the soul, individually, personally, we emerge eventually into a new light and into a transformed person. Let's hope that that's what we are doing collectively in our world today. And anyway, Alistair McIntyre says, well, so where are we going? And what hope might we see? And he draws this analogy with the Dark Ages, again, through the monastic tradition. And he says, in the middle of the Dark Ages, civilization was kept alive, the civilized values, the sense of a purpose and meaning in life, the sense of decency and living together in a humane way. This was kept alive in a very special way by these little monastic communities that formed at about the same time that the Skellig monks were cutting their steps up the cliff. And St. Benedict, he said, of course, inspired these little communities. They were lay communities, and they were self-sufficient as possible. They lived in the rhythm of nature. They were formed by a spiritual sense of life seeking God, and yet they lived in a very ordinary, mundane way. And the rule of St. Benedict, if you know it, is simply about how to live together and organize yourself in a decent and caring and forgiving way, with a particular concern for the poor and for the sick and for children and for the elderly and pilgrims, because these are the most vulnerable people that we can meet. So then he describes this. This wasn't Benedict's intention, but it certainly over the centuries became a force, an inspiration, a network, an example of living in a different way and being able to live in a humane and humanizing and divinizing way, even in the midst of the Dark Ages, as we call them. And then Alistair McIntyre says at the end, he's often quoted, I don't know whether he regrets writing it, but he says, maybe today we are waiting for another and doubtless quite different St. Benedict.